Not looking forward to that.
Got it.
Yeah. Where are you at right now?
I'm up in
You
New
went
York.
to Oh yeah, you went to did it snow a lot over there?
Yeah, yeah. I have to do the same thing. When I'm done with this call, I have to go out and clean the car and the
Yeah.
driveway.
Where are you at right now?
Uh,
Man. Yeah, I put a lot of like salt last night, but it didn't I mean, it didn't make a difference. There's
yeah.
just so much. Oh, no. Okay, I think people are still joining, but let's get started because uh hopefully we can end early so I can go clean out the snow. But it looks beautiful outside, subhanAllah. Okay. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين اللهم انفعنا بما علمتنا وعلمنا ما ينفعنا وزدنا علما يقربنا إليك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام وصل اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. Okay. Zoom always gives me trouble. How do I stop sharing? Oh, okay, never. I got it. Okay. So last week, we discussed, I believe, the Qadar and free will, right? Um, so we're approaching the end of what we call al-Ilahiyaat. So if we look at Aqidah, we can divide the topics of Aqidah into different topics, to different um, related topics. And we begin with what's called Ilahiyat, all the matters related to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Lord, Ilahiyat, right? And then we have matters related to prophets and messengers. We call them Nubuwat. And then we have matters related to the afterlife, to things that are transmitted from the text, right? Aspects of Aqidah that are transmitted from the text. And these things we call sam'iyat. Because sama, you listen, right? You hear. So texts are transmitted through hearing, through listening, um, uh, through the chain of isnad. So that's why we call them sam'iyat. So we're almost nearing the section of ilahiyat from Imam Tahawi's Aqidah. Now, because Imam Tahawi is a early scholar, he doesn't really group these things in that way, and that's fine. But I just want you guys, for you guys to have that conceptual framework in place. Okay, so we want to conclude the section on Ilahiyat today, and move on to the section of prophethood, of proving that the Prophet ﷺ is the last messenger, and issues related to prophethood. Can you guys hear me properly?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so um, we spoke about free will and predestination last time, and just a very quick summary of that is that foreknowledge, Allah knowing the future, does not impact free will necessarily. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creating everything, we said, it seems to impact free will. But we said that we feel that we have free will internally, we have the sense of choosing, and we said that when our actions are created, there is some type of human contribution there because Allah has created within us a irada haditha, a contingent will, right? A created will, and qudra haditha, a contingent power, a created power within us. Now, how does that power and how does that will, how does it relate to the action that they were doing? Well, it relates in some way, some mysterious way that gives us moral responsibility. But it doesn't create those actions. It doesn't actually create those actions. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates those actions. We choose those actions, right? How does our will relate to that choice? Again, we said in some way that gives us that moral responsibility, but we're not actually creating, we're not actually bringing from non-existence to existence. And so, uh, and we gave many proofs for that uh, uh, from the Quran and the verses of the Quran that affirm free will for human beings and so on and so forth, right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reliably, He creates all of our actions that we choose because this is part of His ada, His habit. Or else we would not be able to do any science or anything of that nature, right? Okay. But the human power does not create. But then we said that the Mu'tazila believed that it does create. Mu'tazila said that um, you need to be able to create your actions in order to be held responsible. But we said that no, you don't need to actually create the action itself to be held morally responsible. You just need to intend it. You just need to um, uh, want it, right? So we said the creation of evil is not evil. But the desire for evil and the wanting of evil is evil. Okay? And this is the part where human beings are held responsible. Um, and then we also said like how can a qudra or how can an irada relate to an action and not engage in creation, right? It relates in a specific way, a mysterious way, but not as a relation of creation. And we said there's other examples of attributes which relate to things, right? Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's attribute of qudra, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's attribute of power. In pre-eternity, it related and it linked to all possible things because Allah's qudra could potentially do all possible things. But that relationship is not a relationship of creation. Just because Allah's qudra relates to all possible things, it encompasses all possible things, doesn't mean He actually created all possible things. Okay? So that's a proof to show us that it's logically okay for us to have some type of attribute like that. Okay? And so human beings have an attribute like that. That, yes, we have an attribute of power, we have an attribute of will, but it's not actually creating the action. What is it doing? It's doing something that's giving us moral responsibility. Okay? Which means that the actions that we're doing, they are correctly ascribed to us. Our wills, our choices, they are correctly ascribed to us. We are responsible for them. Are we creating those things from nothing? Not necessarily, no. Okay? So, but that doesn't matter. Okay? That's not necessary for responsibility. Okay, so let's get back to the text of Imam Tahawi's Aqidah. And let's finish it off. Let's go line by line, inshallah. Mm, okay, so I think we left off. We spoke about the attributes of eternality and so on. So we just have only a couple lines after that until we get to nubuwat. So قال المصنف رحمه الله تعالى ونفعنا بعلومه في الدارين آمين خلق الخلق بعلمه. So he created the creation with his knowledge. So remember we said everything Allah creates خلق بسبق ما في علمه. That what he already knew from pre-eternity and based on that knowledge he creates. وَقَدَّرَ لَهُمْ أَقْدَارًا. And the literal meaning of qadr is to apportion out, to divide out, and to limit and restrict things. Okay? And if you look at all creation, they have specific definitions and specific limits. And these limits and definitions have been said by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the second meaning of qadr is hikmah, wisdom. Okay? So obviously, second meaning encompasses everything, all of the actions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we said again that creating a good thing as good and a bad thing as bad is part of wisdom because each is doing a function. Creating bad for the sake of bad is foolish, not creating bad for a greater purpose. So this is um, uh, a discussion related to qadr. وَضَرَبَ لَهُمْ آجَالًا, and He appointed destinies for them and set for them specific lifespans. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَلِكُلِّ أُمَّةٍ أَجَلٌ فَإِذَا جَاءَ أَجَلُهُمْ لَا يَسْتَأْخِرُونَ سَاعَةً وَلَا يَسْتَقْدِمُونَ. That every single ummah, every single nation has a set, fixed ending point. And when that comes, nothing can stop from basically fulfilling that ending point. Okay? Now, we have many hadiths that say that you can increase your ajal, you can increase your lifespan. So whoever is maintains good ties of kinship, right? Silatul Rahim with their parents, with their relatives, and so on. They try their best to maintain good relationships. They have long lives. Okay? So their ajal is increased. So how can we understand this when Allah says that every single person, every single nation has a specific time limit, and when that comes, khalas, you go. So how can we understand that? Any ideas? So the Quran tells us that every single person has a specific time limit, right? That they cannot put forward and they cannot set back. But many of the hadiths, they tell us that if we are good to our kin, if we are good to our parents, that this increases our lifespan. So how do we make sense of that? Any ideas? And if you look at many of the scholars of Islam, Imam Nawawi, he dies in his late 40s, and some of the scholars of Islam, they die quite early. So were these people just not good to their parents, or like what is the wisdom behind this? Anyone want to hazard a guess? Okay, so um oh yeah, yeah, brother Sohaib. Yeah.
So I guess maybe it's based on perception more than anything else, because if everything is already written, from our perspective, um, the life is actually expanding or lengthening or or increasing. But in reality, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's perspective, um, what's written is written. It's all based on perception.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a good way of explaining it. Yeah. That there's some perception element in it. Another way that the ulama explain it is that the barakah of that life increases, right? So when your ajal increases by these kind deeds that you're doing, that the barakah in your life increases. Is that it's as if time expands. If you look at how long Imam Nawawi lived, rahimahullah, and the amount of things that he's written, I mean, you just count like the number of pages versus the time that he had on this earth. It seems illogical that this one person wrote this much. I mean, it's like what, like 200 pages per day or something like that. It's a crazy number. And you just wonder, how is this possible? Like, it's as if time just, his 44 years was 120 years, right? Because of the barakah of his time, the immense barakah of his time. The same is of Imam al-Tabari, rahimahullah ta'ala, that he lived, I think, to his 60s or 70s, I can't remember, but the amount of stuff that he wrote, I mean, Tafsir al-Tabari just by itself is several thousand pages. Tafsir al-Tabari. And then this Tarikh al-Tabari, the history of Tabari. And he wrote tons of other stuff. I mean, it comes out to something like, I don't know, like 100, 200, 300 pages per day. And unless there's some type of special time capsule that they're in, I mean, it seems logically impossible that one person wrote that much. Uh, Another example is Ibn Asakir, for example, right? I just want to show this to you guys, right? Because this is like, it's so ridiculous sometimes that it's like funny. Okay, like you can't even believe it. It's like a meme. Look, so Ibn Asakir, Tarikh Dimashq, History of Damascus, right? Seems like a short read. What's up with this? It's 30 volumes, right? It's 30 volumes. Um, let me see. There was a picture where somebody laid this, uh, right side up and it just reached the ceiling. Like it's all the way to the ceiling. Okay. So this is Ibn Asakir's Tarikh Damashq, that the history of Damascus. It's 30 volumes, several thousands and thousands of pages, and somebody calculated like if you were to start writing this when you were a child, you would need to write 600 pages a day in order to actually finish this work. And like it's like mind-boggling. And there's like multiple PhDs, like a team of PhD students that need to work on this to do the tahqiq and verification and publish new editions, right? I mean, you're telling me one person wrote that, right? How long did he live? He lived till 71, right? But one person wrote that. And so it's very like it's unbelievable sometimes. So this idea of ajal, is to show us that the barakah in a life can be extraordinary, and doing good deeds, it increases your barakah. That you might have a very small amount of time, but the amount of things that you can do in that small amount of time, or the quality, it might not even be the amount, right? It might be just the quality. The quality of things that you do will be enormous. There are people like that in the Muslim world, in Islamic history, where some of them they didn't even produce a single book. Okay, so for example, Abdul Qadir Jilani, rahimahullah ta'ala, he didn't produce many written works, but his legacy is like it left a deep impact in Islamic history. Okay, so this is all related to ajal. So the more good deeds that we do, that time is filled with barakah, inshallah ta'ala. لم يخف عليه شيء قبل أن يخلقهم وعلم ما هم عاملون قبل أن يخلقهم وأمرهم بطاعته ونهاهم عن معصيته. So nothing was hidden from him before he created them. And he knew what they would do before he created them. He commanded them to obey him and forbade them from disobeying him. So Allah knew in his pre-eternal knowledge that if one of the elements of his knowledge is the essence of, let's say, Nazmul Hasan. And he knew that if he creates Nazmul Hasan in this specific instance, in this way, with his free will, Nazmul Hasan is going to do something bad. Na'udhu billah. Okay? Allah creates him in that specific instance. But he commands him to do good and to avoid the bad. So, yes, Allah knew you would do something bad, yet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded you to do what is good, right? And He commands you to do good, but it's that free will that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that with your free will, if you were given free will, depending on your nature and how you are, you're going to pick this. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chooses to create you anyway, and also وَأَمَرَهُمْ بِطَاعَتِهِ وَنَهَاهُمْ عَنْ مَعْصِيَتِهِ, that He commanded you to avoid the bad and to do the good. Okay? So his creation is subject to his command. And this also shows us that Allah is so powerful that He is okay with having creation that disobeys Him. He does not like it. It's not rida. It's not pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But out of a greater wisdom, there are people in this world that sin, and most people are sinners, as we know from our own experience, right? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He created them for a certain wisdom. One of the wisdoms is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala manifests all of His attributes in the most perfect way with people that sin, by forgiving them, by excusing them. And we're going to talk about some of these hadiths, right, that come up. And of seeing their ubudiyah, their servanthood, and their brokenness, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives them, right? Or the stories of redemption, that people that are sinners, that they turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and with the power of Allah, they become completely different people, right? Something that seems impossible becomes possible through the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وكل شيء يجري بتقديره ومشيئته ومشيئته تنفذ لا مشيئة للعباد إلا ما شاء لهم فما شاء لهم كان وما لم يشاء لم يكن وكل شيء يجري بتقديره ومشيئته. So everything runs according to his course and his will, his decree and his will. So mashia is the same thing as irada, Allah's will. Okay? And what does Allah's will mean? It doesn't mean like a desire that Allah has to do something. And we say that no, it cannot mean this something, right? When we speak about human desires, human beings seek out things because there's no other way of getting the thing that they want. For example, in order to fill your stomach, to feel satiated, you need to go through the intermediary of eating. You need to go through the intermediary of drinking in order to feel quenched of your thirst. Okay? You can't quench your thirst in any other way. This is the experience of human beings. What about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? In order to manifest his attributes, did he have to do XYZ? Right? There's no other way for him to do it. In order to sort of, I don't know, like make somebody believe he had to do XYZ. We say no. Allah is devoid of aghrad. Gharad. Gharad is a word that means, the Salafiyah, they'll say, oh, you're saying Allah is devoid of wisdom. No, Allah is not devoid of wisdom. Wisdom means placing things in their proper place. Okay, and this is obviously, you cannot deny this of Allah. Wisdom means putting things in their proper place. Okay, but Allah is devoid of gharad, which means motivating factors. Ba'ith, things that are pushing him, some external factor pushing him, okay? Or some thing that he needs to get done. So, for example, um, uh, we have a technical definition here. We don't need to worry about that right now. But he is devoid of any type of pushing or ba'ith or internal motivating factors, right? That is pushing him to get something done. Okay? So there's no external type of force that is pushing him to create the world, to do this, to do that. It is purely by his will and if you ask, why did he create the universe? Why not? Right? Will does not require further explanation. Okay? If I gave you two, this is the famous example that Imam Ghazali uses, right? If I gave you two dates, and those two dates are exactly the same, they are exactly the same. Okay? And I asked you, pick a date. Which one do you want to eat? What would you do?
You would just pick one.
You just pick one. That's it. But those people that say that every single choice and will that we have is driven by some type of motivating factor. So we're always obviously seeking some type of benefit, or between two choices, we're comparing which one's better, which one's not, right? This is what the philosophers used to say. But actually, this is secondary to will. This is not the essence of will. Will just does takhsis. It just specifies one of several possibilities. That's it. And you don't need a further explanation for it, right? You don't need a further explanation. Just like the example of the date. If you were correct that, okay, with will, what we're seeking is like we're trying to analyze which is better, which is maybe somebody, if somebody is um, uh, you know um, uh, they have a case of some mental illness, they might be making experiments with both dates to see which one's better, whatever. But for most of us, okay, these two dates are the same, so I'll just pick one. Not a big deal. If our will was not like that, then we would starve to death before we picked a date. We would just sit there, right? And we'd have a blue screen of death in our brains. We wouldn't be able to pick one. Okay? This is, by the way, this is what a computer would do, right? This is what a computer does. If it doesn't have an algorithm in order to decide which way to go, it'll just, it'll just keep running forever. It wouldn't know what to do. This is why computers don't have will. They don't have mashia. They don't have irada, right? So Allah's will is not driven by shahwa. It's not driven by any type of desire. It's not driven by some motivating factor pushing him to do something, right? It is gratuitous. We say the word, I don't like the word gratuitous, but like it has no ulterior motive. That's the best way of putting it. It has no ulterior motive. It is purely to give because he wants to. Why did he create? Because he wants to. Why does he bless people? Because he wants to, right? Why does he punish certain people? Because of his justice, right? Because of his justice. Okay. And then Imam Tahawi says, يهدي من يشاء ويعصم ويعافي فضلا ويضل من يشاء ويخذل ويبتلي عدلا وكلهم يتقلبون في مشيئته بين فضله وعدله. So he guides whomever he wills and protects and keeps them safe from harm out of his grace. Not because he is obligated to, as the Mu'tazila said, but that it is from his grace, his fadl, and he leads astray whomever he wills and forsakes and afflicts them out of his justice. So when he punishes people, when he afflicts people, it is out of his adl, his justice. All of them are subject to his will between his grace and his justice. Now, this idea of guiding, yahdi man yasha. Guidance is not simply a human choice. There's a human contribution to it where we accept the message, right? Where we might accept the message or where we might uh, be convinced of something and we decide to follow it. But guidance is also from the tawfiq of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the sense that He creates it in our heart. He makes it more amenable to us and He makes the situations and circumstances amenable to us in order for us to be guided, right? And this is why I believe it was Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah said that, or Ibn Qayyim, I forget, that there's never been a sincere seeker of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that was not guided to Allah. And the reason for that is not due to their power, but regardless of the circumstances, you might be in the weirdest, wildest, most like uninviting circumstances, and you have that intention to be guided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah will create that guidance for you, right? There will be, He will change circumstances and situations in such a way that you are guided. Because guidance is a creation from Allah. Yahdi man yasha. He guides whoever He wills, regardless of our own exterior analysis. Um, And there are two types of guidance, right? Hidayatul Irshad, and I forget the other one, but that is like actual. Sorry, yeah, it's right here actually. Am I saying? So Irshad and Dalala, and the second type is Tawfiq. So Hidayatul Irshad is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala again commanding you and showing you what is good, but not necessarily um presenting the circumstances or creating the circumstances for you to be guided. And why is that? Out of His justice. Because you're arrogant, you're refusing to be guided, you reject the message, and so the roads start to close. The roads start to close. And we get this from the Quran, وَأَمَّا ثَمُودُ فَهَدَيْنَاهُمْ فَاسْتَحَبُّوا الْعَمَى عَلَى الْهُدَى. Right? And for Thamud, right? The people of Thamud, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent them, I believe it was Salih alayhi salam, and Allah guided them in the sense that Allah gave them the message, gave them the opportunity, opened for them the opportunity, but فَاسْتَحَبُّوا الْعَمَى عَلَى الْهُدَى, that they chose to go with blindness, being blind, rather than being guided. Okay? So in this case, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not create the circumstances of guidance for them. Okay? He gave them the message, they didn't accept it. Okay, the road is closed, the punishment comes. Right? So this is Hidayatul Irshad. And then there is Tawfiq. Now, Tawfiq is that you will accept the message, you want to be guided, you're taking steps to be guided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah's power coincides with what you want. This is Tawfiq. Allah's power and His will coincides with what you want, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guides you. إِنَّكَ لَتَهْدِي إِلَى صِرَاطٍ مُسْتَقِيمٍ. And again, this is sorry, إنك لا تهدي من أحببت. Here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling the Prophet ﷺ, إنك لا تهدي من أحببت. You cannot guide the one that you love. Right? Who is this talking about? Does anyone know? Who specifically did the Prophet ﷺ want to become Muslim? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told him, إنك لا تهدي من أحببت.
Abu Talib.
Abu Talib, right? Abu Talib. So the Prophet ﷺ really wished that Abu Talib would become Muslim. And again, the Prophet ﷺ can only do Hidayatul Irshad. He can't do Tawfiq, right? So this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّكَ لَتَهْدِي إِلَى صِرَاطٍ مُسْتَقِيمٍ. He's talking to the Prophet ﷺ, indeed, you guide to the straight path. What type of guidance is this? Is it Tawfiq or Irshad? Allah's telling the Prophet ﷺ, you guide to the straight path. So, what type of guidance is that?
Irshad.
Irshad, good. Showing them the way, right? Calling them to the truth, trying to convince them. But if they don't internally accept and make that choice, and Allah's tawfiq does not coincide with it, they will not be guided, right? But the possibility is there that they will choose, and regardless of the situation, regardless of their station in life, whatever it may be, they will be guided. That's also a possibility. Okay? And this is why there's a famous story um, of Sahal al-Tustari, who was one of the great saints of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And one day he was traveling and he was robbed. So a group of highway robbers, they, uh, you know, surrounded his caravan, and they're like, get out, give us all the gold, all that stuff. And so they took everything from him. And it was getting near Maghrib time. And so before, they were searching everybody. So the leader of the group, he's like, okay, give me a second, right? Give me a second. And he goes next to the tree and he's like, I'm fasting. I'm doing, I'm fasting for the sake of Allah. I need to break my fast. The highway robber. Okay. So Sahl at-Tustari is like, you're a highway robber. You guys know the punishment for highway robbery in Islam?
Execution, right?
It's worse than that. It's having your opposing limbs cut off and then execution, right? It's the worst punishment. And the reason is because people that do highway robbery, they destroy society. You can't even travel anywhere. I mean, it's a complete collapse of society that leads to highway robbery, right? You can't even go from one place to another, right? This is like the base metric of a peaceful civilization. And then there are people that disrupt it. And these people deserve the worst possible punishment imaginable, right? That the peace on the road is not given, right? Innocent people, their possessions are taken off, and usually highway robbers kill their victims, right? So this guy is a highway robber, and he's just stole everything from Sahel Tustari and his group, the caravan. And it's Maghrib time. He's like, wait, before we finish robbing them, I gotta take a minute. I gotta break my fast. Okay. So Sahel Tustari is surprised, like, you're a highway robber. Why are you fasting? Right? Why are you fasting? And why do you think he would be fasting? So he responds to Sahel Tustari. He says, look, I'm trying to keep a door open between me and Allah. Just some door. I'm trying to keep a small door open between me and Allah. Yes, my life is not ideal. This is awful, the things that I'm doing, but I'm trying to keep a small door between me and Allah. Keep that door open, right? And many years later, Sahel al-Tustari goes to Hajj, and guess who he meets at Hajj? He meets this highway robber. He meets this person, he's completely reformed, he's come for Hajj, he's praying, he's fasting, he's doing the worship, he's left his old life. And what this shows us is that no matter the situation in our life, again, yahdi man yasha, Allah guides whoever He wills. No matter who you are. It could be the worst criminal. Remember the person people he killed, right? Christians are horrified at this story. They're like, how? But when they're horrified at that story, they're demanding that Allah do X, Y, or Z. Like, where's your respect for God? Like, do you believe Allah is all powerful? Right? But Christians demand things from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? He can do anything. You could be worshiping Allah all your life. Nothing is forcing Allah to give you Jannah, right? Because you don't deserve your existence is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So how can you say that you deserve something from Allah, right? So, but in Islam, we believe that there's no person that is irredeemable. There's no person, right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guides whoever He wills. The Prophet's bodyguard, Walid ibn al-Mughira, he was a person who killed 13 of his closest companions. He killed them in cold blood in order to rob them of their treasure, and he escaped. And he had nowhere to go. And so the only place he was being hunted by all of the clans, right? He made an awful decision. He betrayed, he did something awful, and he goes and hides in Medina. The Prophet ﷺ saw something within him. He saw the remorse. He saw whatever it may be, a desire for redemption. The Prophet ﷺ welcomed him, right? And from then on, Walid ibn Mughira was inseparable from the Prophet ﷺ. That there's like some famous figures, like there's a bodyguard always in the background, like somebody like always looking around like this, right? You can imagine like there's some famous figures or whatever. Walid ibn Mughira was like that for the Prophet, right? He would go inside, the Prophet would go inside the house. The Prophet didn't tell him to do this, right? I mean, but Walid ibn Mughira, he's be standing with a sword outside the door, right? Someone's trying to enter. He's like, wait, wait, who are you? Okay. So Walid ibn Mughira went from this greed infested killer, okay? His friends, he did a job, a mercenary job, and his friends tricked him and didn't give him the money. Okay? So they took all the money. So while they were sleeping, he got them drunk, he killed them and took all their money. And he ran, right? And then but he started a clan war, a tribal war, and all the tribes are now out to get him and kill him. Okay? This pushes him towards Islam to go to Medina. And then being with the Prophet affects his heart, and he becomes one of the most righteous and the most loyal of the Sahaba, right? To the point that he's following the Prophet around all the time to make sure that he's protected, right? So Yahdi man yasha, he guides whoever he wills. So the lessons from this is that, like that highway robber that Sahul at-Tustari encountered, we should always keep a door open between us and Allah, right? Even if we're drowning in sin, there should always be some door between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? And this is something, unfortunately, a lot of Muslims in the Muslim world, they don't understand. It's really weird. Like, if you're like, you either have to be perfect or you have to be a complete degenerate. This is my experience of living in Bangladesh and other areas, right? That either you're praying 5 times a day or you're a completely like degenerate person, your girlfriend, this, that, you're drinking alcohol, you're partying, you're like, and then you're like, are you Muslim? You say, well, of course I'm Muslim, but like, like I can't, I'm not religious, man. I'm probably for hell. This is what they'll say, right? So I mean, I can't pray 5 times a day, this and that. Why is it these two extremes? So we have to get rid of these two extremes. There has to be some middle ground that you keep a door open between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay. So let's see. And one of the beautiful things that Sheikh Shanar, one of the great muhaqqiqs of Aqidah texts, and I was watching his class on Tahawi, he mentioned that every single person is either in two circles with respect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That they are either in the circle of His mercy, Da'iratul Rahmah, or they are in the circle of His justice, His adl. Okay, Da'iratul Adl. And on the day of judgment, if you're not in the circle of mercy and Allah's mercy, you're toast. You're toast. And there's a famous hadith of the Prophet ﷺ where he tells Aisha radiallahu an that no one will be called to account, right, with scrutiny except that he will be ruined. That anyone who Allah tells the angels to do his hisab on the day of judgment, they'll be ruined, right? And the Aisha radiallahu an is like she brings up a verse from the Quran, right? As for the one who's given his record in his right hand, he will be given an easy reckoning. So the Prophet interpreted this as just the presentation of deeds, as the presentation of deeds. But anyone who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala examines in detail, or he sends the angels to do their examining, they'll be ruined. But who will be saved? The Prophet, this is a beautiful hadith. Let me, right. Who will be saved? The people that are in the circle of Allah's mercy. This hadith is in Bukhari and Muslim, muttafaqun alayh, so it's very, very sahih, where the Prophet says that on the day of judgment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bring the believer close, and he will put a screen, a satr, a cover between him, between the believing mu'min and the rest of humanity. And then he will be presenting all of the deeds that this person did. He's like, did you do this? Did you do this? Look, did you do this sin? Do you remember doing this sin? And he will present, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself will present all of these things to this believer, right? Now, if Allah himself is doing that to you, what do you think? What's going to be the result? You're going to feel like what? Are you going to feel scared or happy, or what would you feel?
Scared.
You'd be very scared, right? Allah Himself, He's like, oh, my servant, did you do this? And the servant will say, yes. Yes, I did. Did you do this? Yes, I did. And Allah will go through this entire list. And He will hide, right? This is only a personal conversation between you and Allah on the day of judgment, if you're in Allah's mercy. And what will Allah say? Out of His mercy, He will say that I covered these sins for you in the world, and I will cover them today on the day of judgment, and I will forgive you, right? And then the good deeds will be handed to him, right? And so his reckoning will be easy. So the servant admits his mistakes before Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives all of it. So anyone who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes to task, they'll be destroyed. Because you don't even need several sins. Allah takes like 4 sins from your life. And He's like, why did you do that? Right? What were you thinking? Well, you weren't thinking something that was legal. You weren't behaving in a way that required of tawheed, right? You know the punishment of shirk is like you could make something very difficult as a judge, right? But we should always ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for His rahmah, for His rahmah. And this is a really beautiful hadith. I'll send you the Arabic text, and it's in Bukhari and Muslim, that Allah will bring the believer close on the day of resurrection and envelop him in His mercy. The actual Arabic says that He will put a cover between him and the rest of creation, right? So it's like you're getting into a private room to speak to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And He will make him confess his sins by saying, do you remember doing this sin and this sin? He will reply, my Rabb, I remember. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will say, I covered it up for you in the life of this world, and I forgive you and I forgive it for you today. And then the record of his good deeds will be handed to him. And one of the most powerful hadiths is that the Prophet says, whoever covers the sins of his brother in this world, Allah will cover his sins on the day of resurrection. Right? It's a very powerful hadith, very beautiful hadith, that it should really motivate us not to backbite and not to spread false rumors about people. Obviously, this is related to things that are like minor sins, right? Like if Brother Sohaib comes to me and says, like tomorrow I'm gonna go and murder Brother Umar, right? I'm gonna murder him, right? And he confesses to me. So now you say, well, whoever covers the sins of his brother, do you think that applies in that situation?
I
No,
would hope not.
No, it doesn't. Okay, that
me
doesn't,
neither.
because he's making, this is between him and makhluk, another other creation. Okay, so in that situation, this is not something between him and Allah. This is now between him and another creation. So this is going to lead to that harm. So we have to stop him, right? We gotta jump him while he's doing it. So but we have to hide the sins of our brothers and keep their secrets. There's a famous famous saying of the scholars that the heart of the believer is a black hole. I forget the, sorry, it's a locked box, right? The heart of the believer is a locked box. It's an abyss for secrets, right? An abyss. What happens if you drop something in an abyss? What happens? Like
Lost.
it's lost, done. It's you
It
put
doesn't come out.
it never comes out. Exactly. So the heart of the believer is an abyss for secrets, for other people's secrets. And the reason is again because of this virtue that on the day of judgment that we hope because you did this Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will cover your sins, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will put you in that realm of his mercy and not take you to task. So this is something we hope from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? That's very beautiful. وَيُضِلُّ مَن يَشَاءُ وَيَخْذُلُ وَيَبْتَلِي عَدْلًا, and he misguides and he forsakes and afflicts whoever he wills out of his mercy. Sorry, out of his justice, right? وَكُلُّهُمْ يَتَقَلَّبُونَ فِي مَشِيئَتِهِ بَيْنَ فَضْلِهِ وَعَدْلِهِ. That every single person they are subject, they are constantly being يتقلبون, turn between his adl, his justice, and his fadl, and his mercy, right? Sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows you his justice, sometimes he shows you his mercy. And in both cases we have to maintain the adab with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala so that hopefully in the day of judgment we'll be shown his mercy. Allah is just and never unjust. So the meaning of injustice, we get two meanings, right? One meaning of injustice is that you are transgressing in another's property. Okay, somebody else owns something and you're transgressing, you're taking it or you're using it in an improper way. This can never apply to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala owns everything, right? So he can never be unjust in this sense. Another meaning of injustice is acting without wisdom, not placing things in their proper form, not placing things in their proper place. Again, uh, in this idea, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cannot be unjust because He has the attribute of hikmah, of wisdom. So whatever He is placed in the right place at the right time. Okay? وَفَضْلِهِ وَعَدْلِهِ. Okay, وَهُوَ مُتَعَالٍ and this is my favorite line for some of our Salafi brothers who say that Asha'ira and Maturidiyya, you know, they don't interpret Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's attributes correctly. This is from the Salaf, okay? وَهُوَ مُتَعَالٍ, he is exalted, عَنِ الْأَضْدَادِ, having opposites, وَالْأَنْدَادِ, having equals, لَا رَادَّ لِقَضَائِهِ. Oh, sorry, this is not the right line. I think it's much down further. لا راد لقضائه ولا معقب لحكمه ولا غالب لأمره. So he is exalted above having opposites or equals. There is no repeller of his decree, no deferrer of his judgment, and no overcomer of his command. ولا غالب لأمره. Right? إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون. On the walls of the Alhambra, right? The famous, there's a really famous structure in Andalusia, southern Spain, we call the Alhambra. And written above those walls is actually La ghaliba illallah, right? There's no overcomer except for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. آمنا بذلك كله وأيقنا أن كلا من عنده. And we believe in all of that and we are certain that everything is from him. So أيقنا, Imam Maturidi rahimahullah, he says that they profess it and believe it due to textual proofs and rational proofs, right? Because there are textual, nususi proofs that are going back to the Prophet ﷺ, and there are rational proofs. Islam is rational, Islam is something that is reasonable, and that's why they believe it. And yeah, okay. And so did the prophets. The prophets they sought rational proofs, right? Just like Ibrahim alayhi salam. And as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَكَذَلِكَ نُرِي إِبْرَاهِيمَ مَلَكُوتَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَلِيَكُونَ مِنَ الْمُوقِنِينَ. That to increase Ibrahim alayhi salam's yaqeen, we showed him مَلَكُوتَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. that we showed him the realm of the samawat and al-ard لِيَكُونَ مِنَ الْمُوقِنِينَ. Okay? To increase his yaqeen. Yeah, so the different topics we just finish, as you can see, Ilahiyaat. Okay? Ilahiyaat, the matters related to uh, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now we're going to go into Nubuwat. And the section on Nubuwat is very small, actually. It's just literally one passage in Aqidah Tahawiyya. In other works, it's a longer chapter. Um, so now we're going to go into Nubuwat. Okay? And then we have As-Sam'iyat. Sam'iyat, the textual, all of the beliefs narrated from the texts. Okay, and then that's the third category. We're going to talk about the vision of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We're going to talk about faith in the night journey, faith in the Hawd of the Prophet, ﷺ, his intercession. We already talked about this, Iman bil Qadar wal Qadar, uh, the footstool, the angels, the books. These are all sam'iyat. Okay. So remember, we said that Aqidah Tahawiyya is not organized like later Aqidah books, which have these neat sections and so on and so forth. This is just a list of beliefs. Even these headings and these titles that I have here, these are from me. This is not from Imam Tahawi. Okay. All right. So now we go to uh, Nubuwat. We finished Ilahiyat. Big achievement. This is usually the longest section of any Aqidah text. This is where all of the philosophy, all the complicated stuff happens. Now we get to some of the fun stuff, which is the proofs for the prophets, alayhi salatu wassalam, the afterlife, the day of judgment, and so on and so forth. Okay, so now let's switch to that. We only have, I'll just go for 10 more minutes and inshallah we can finish it off next time. Okay. Um, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Okay, so question is, why do we need a prophet? Why do we need prophets? If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exists, I mean, we could just follow Allah, right? Or something like that. We need prophets. Let me move it to the other screen. Okay. All right. Allah has 99 names or more, much more, right? No human, and remember, we said that one of the attributes of Allah is mukhalifun lil hawadith, because He's a necessary being. He is completely and utterly different from human beings. So if He's completely and utterly different from human beings, do you think that human beings can imitate Allah's attributes? What do you guys think? If Allah is completely different than human beings, can human beings imitate Allah's attributes?
No.
No. It seems the answer is no. I know there's an entire tradition in Islam where, beginning with Imam Ghazali, where he says that the foundation of akhlaq, the foundation of sort of character and so on, and tasawwuf is imitating Allah's attributes, right? But this imitation is not a true imitation at all, because none of the attributes of Allah can be shared by human beings, ever, right? Because Allah is so different than us. So what's the solution to this? Okay. First of all, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals himself through creation. This is indisputable. That when we analyze creation with the tools, the rational tools that we have, we understand that it tells us something about the creator. If you go into a room and you see a beautiful chair, right, made from pure leather, the studs and the base of the chair is like carved from artisan wood, and it has like fine working and detail. What does this tell us about the maker of this chair? What would that tell us? See the nice leather, the beautiful stitches, whatever it may be. It tells us the workmanship, the care, right? the level of skill, the wisdom to be able to place certain things in the right place, right? It gives us all this information about the creator of that chair. The same thing in the entire universe. When we see the structure of the universe, we find tremendous wisdom there, and we find that the creation itself is there's an unspoken communication to us. When we see the sun, when we see the sunset, when we see a beautiful moon, when we see the stars, there's an unspoken communication happening to us. And this is what we call the signs and pointers, the ayat, the malakut as-samawati wal ard. We just talked about with Ibrahim alayhi salam that Allah وَكَذَلِكَ نُرِي إِبْرَاهِيمَ مَلَكُوتَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ, the signs in the creation, right? لِيَكُونَ مِنَ الْمُوقِنِينَ, that it increased his yaqeen by reflecting on the signs in creation. But these signs, they're pointers. They're not detailed instructions. You can't go ask a tree, how do I pray my salah? You can't do that. You can't go ask a tree, if I'm going through a divorce, how do I navigate this? The tree's not going to help you there. Okay? Maybe a jinn will help you. You find some way to communicate with a jinn or something, but a tree itself won't help you. Reflecting on creation might not help you navigate your divorce. Reflecting on creation might not help you raise your kids. Okay? You might actually get the wrong idea. You might see, for example, that spiders, they eat their parents. So you're like, okay, you know what? Based on nature, I don't really want to have kids because they might eat me, right? Or kill me or whatever it may be. So the nature gives us signs and pointers, ayat. There's an unspoken communication, but there isn't a detailed instruction. But as human beings, we need to know how to live. We need to understand how to live in the world. And we need to avoid this problem of misinterpretation and mistakes in interpreting the signs. Now, there's a second aspect to this. Uh, we need the Prophet to clarify, right, how to read the signs of creation. So this is the first reason we need a Prophet. How to read the signs of creation accurately and how to live our lives. The second thing is that, remember, we said long time ago, human beings cannot be defined as rational animals. They are not hayawan natik. Again, I'm using the theory of Taha Abdul Rahman here, Dr. Taha Abdul Rahman, which is I find it very convincing, it's very beautiful, and it answers a lot of questions, right? And you can even use this argument, it's very airtight for to prove the necessity for prophets, right? Where human beings are not rational animals. Rationality is just one of the tools that human beings have. It's a tool, just like your sight, just like your smell, just like your hearing. Rationality is a tool that's used by the heart, used by the qalb. To do what? To extract, to do abstractions, and to perform operations. Ideally, to get to the truth. But falsehood, true or false? To justify falsehood, can you do that? Can you use rationality to justify something bad?
No.
Yeah, yeah, you can. Of course you can.
Well, if it's
Like,
just logical based,
can you use your rationality to justify something bad?
you can. Yeah, you can.
Yeah, yeah. For example, I mean, somebody did an awful study of IQs of the world. So there's some Twitter people are like, we should not send any aid to these places and implement eugenics. I mean, logically speaking, if you want to maximize smart people in the world or whatever you want to say, okay, eugenics and sterilize all these people. And this is how America operated at a certain time in history, right? They interpreted, for example, African Americans, black people, as a lower class of human beings. And so that justified them being enslaved. And they justified these things with rational arguments. But so rationality can be used for good or it can be used for evil, right? It can be used to justify falsehood. It can be used to justify truth. The true function of rationality is to seek out truth, right? But when I say that it is good, it is obligatory upon you to use your rationality to seek out truth, what kind of judgment is that? Is that a rational judgment? Right? For example, we're having all this discussion, we're having this class, I'm presenting arguments, and the implicit idea is that all of you guys, including myself, it's obligatory upon us that if this is convincing to you, you should accept it. So what kind of judgment is that? Is that a rational judgment or is it an ethical judgment? What kind? Like you should accept, if I give you a convincing argument for the existence of God and this explains reality to you, you should accept it, you should live by it. Should. That's the hint.
It's an ethical. It's
It's an
not.
ethical judgment. Good. So if rationality itself is based in ethics for it to work, then ethics is prior to rationality. This is the Rahman's argument. It's very beautiful. I think it works. I think it works. It's very nice, right? Ethics is prior to rationality, and therefore the essence of human beings is not rational, it's ethical. Okay? The essence of human beings is that they should be good. They should be ethically good. This is the essence of human beings. And what does this entail? It means to accept the truth and reject falsehood. You should accept the truth and you should reject falsehood. You can't be like the sophists, right? What the sophists in ancient Greece, what they did is they would teach you arguments to just get whatever you wanted. Doesn't matter if it's true, it doesn't matter if it's false. They would just teach you tricks of the trade in order to convince people and manipulate and influence them to just get whatever you wanted. Get more money, get more power, get women, whatever it is, right? No question about truth or falsehood, right? But when we're trying to discover the truth and live an ethical life, this is an ethical judgment. It's not something rash that you're making a rational judgment, right? It's an ethical one. So if human beings at their core are ethical animals, then they need the perfect ethical exemplar to teach them how to live. They can't imitate Allah's attributes because, again, we said Allah's not similar to creation, right? So, um, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Ash-Shura, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٌ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. That there's nothing that is like him and he is hearing and all-seeing. So we can't imitate Allah. So who can we imitate? A prophet, right? When Allah sends a prophet, that prophet, remember, the humans have an essence, which is what? Ethical. So there has to be some creation that Allah creates that is the perfect example of this essence. It's the perfect completion of this essence. So imagine, for example, that you go into a shop and it sells chairs. Okay? So we have an idea of the essence of a chair. And then you just see just incomplete chairs all over the shop. Now you go to that person, you ask, it's like, what do you guys do? He's like, we sell chairs. So he sells chairs, but in the shop there are just incomplete chairs. There's just some stools, there's some like leather seats, whatever it may be, but nothing is complete. But you know for certain that this person he sells chairs. So what does this entail? That he creates what? There are incomplete chairs in the shop. This guy sells chairs, right? Definitely sells chairs. This shop is in business. People are buying chairs. What does it mean? You're looking at the incomplete chairs.
It means he's not really selling chairs.
Well, that, or he is selling chairs. It just, the ones that you happen to come to are incomplete, right?
Mm.
So he must have produced a chair that is complete chair, right? We can call a chair that people are buying, right? So, and his shop is running, his shop is open, but now he's in his workshop, all the chairs are incomplete. Same thing with human beings. All of the human beings that we see around us, they're not ethically perfect, including ourselves, right? But Allah's the one who actualizes all essences, right? That there has to be an essence of human being that need to be actualized. So what we're saying is that the essence of human beings is ethical. So where is that perfect example of an ethical human being? There has to be one somewhere. Just like the incomplete chairs, well, this guy's selling a chair, but I only see incomplete chairs. There has to be some complete chair. Same thing with human beings. We don't see perfect ethical human beings everywhere, right? A perfect example. So there has to be at some point, at some time in the future or the past, there has to have been an ethical example that is perfect. And this is why it's a necessity for prophets to appear. If there are human beings with the essence of ethics, there has to be a prophet, right? There has to be a prophet that lives and perfects the ethical life. Why do we need that? In order for us to perfect our essence, right? Because all we have is the essence of ethics, right? We have to perfect our essence. And how do we do this? By imitating this perfect human being, right? In order to actualize the essential nature of humanity. Okay? Or else we're saying that Allah created an essence and like he left it incomplete. Okay? That he left it incomplete. And there's a second argument, which is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, his creation deserves praise. He commands us to praise his creation, right? His creation deserves praise. When you look at a beautiful rose, when you look at the universe, the stars, you want to praise the creator in a way, but you don't have the words and you can't do justice to that praise. So there must be some human being, right, that Allah has created, this creator, okay, who's created this unspoken, this communication from the universe. There has to be at least some human being who has perfected this art of praising the creator, right? Who's perfected this art of praising the creator and who has a direct line of communication with him. Okay, so this is also why we say that there is a necessity for prophets. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَوْ جَعَلْنَاهُ مَلَكًا لَجَعَلْنَاهُ رَجُلًا وَلَلَبَسْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ مَا يَلْبِسُونَ. If we had made him an angel, the Prophet ﷺ, okay, we would have obviously made him a man. So even if Allah sent us an angel as a messenger, what is Allah saying? He would have made him a man. He would have made the angel look like a man. And what's the reason for this? Because um or not they truly reflect the ethical nature of the process. Um I guess you could say that, but uh we're on but any human being who's not like purely evil, they're indirectly reflecting his ethical nature anyway, right? I mean, even if a non-believer, they are they don't believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but they're acting in a good way, they're still reflecting some of the ethical nature of the process, right? You can't get away from that unless you're pure evil, like you're like Israel or something, right? They're just not they're just not reflecting the highest ethical virtue, which is Iman, okay? Which is why their ethical actions aren't rewarded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But you can't get away from it, right? This is why the Akbarians, they have this concept of Haqiqa Muhammadiyya, right? This primordial, pre-eternal blueprint of perfection that applies to all creation, right? We're not saying the Prophet is eternal, na'udhu billah. That's not what we're saying, right? But there's this blueprint in the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala of perfection, of how limited beings can be perfect, ethically perfect. And any time that you see some limited being acting in a beautiful or perfect way, it's reflecting that blueprint that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has in His decree. And this blueprint we call Haqiqa Muhammadiyya. Why do we call it Haqiqa Muhammadiyya? Because this blueprint was perfectly actualized in one man we call the Prophet. Okay? So he followed the blueprint exactly, right? So if you follow even 2% of the blueprint or 5% or 10%, then you are in the presence, you're being judged and not judged, sorry, you are reflecting the Haqiqa Muhammadiyya, those attributes of perfection. Okay? Um, so Allah's saying that even if Allah sent us an angel, He would send a man. Because if Allah sent an angel, people would be scared. People wouldn't know how to get close to this angel, and the angel will not be able to relate to human beings, right? So because the nature of an angel is different. An angel has a different nature, it has a different essence. So we need to learn from and imitate someone or something that has the same essence as us, which is a human being that has perfected his ethical capability. Okay, and this is the only way that that we get to learn. And when Allah says, وَلَلَبَسْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ مَا يَلْبِسُونَ, that and would have caused them the same confusion that they are causing now, right? That the Meccans, they began with a faulty premise. They began with the premise that we need a messenger that is not human. But this premise itself is faulty. Why would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala communicate with you in a language that you don't understand? Right? Now you might say, well, the Quran, I don't know Arabic. It's possible for you to learn Arabic, 100%. And there are representatives of Islam that do know Arabic that can tell you what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said. So this is not a problem. But if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent you an alien in order to communicate with you, I mean, there's no commonality between you and the alien. In the same way that you have nothing in common between you and an angel, right? So this wouldn't really work, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would communicate with you in a language that you don't understand, that is not relevant to you. So just as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates everything and apportions everything exactly the way they need it, Allah, if He were to send a messenger, He would also create a messenger that fulfills your needs, that speaks to you at your level, in the way that you understand, right? So as we know, the Prophet ﷺ is the last messenger, and we call him Nabi and Rasul. And something very interesting I want to point out from the word Nabi. Nabi comes from nubuwa. It comes from the word meaning elevation, something high, right? Something up there. Okay. So now in Arabic, you can use a active participle, like a word indicating an action, right? For example, swimmer. You know, swimmer? Swimmer is person who swims. Or I don't know, eater. Eater. Eater is a person who is eating. Okay. So you can use it in the meaning of the thing being done to them. Okay. So for example, a hitter, hitter, someone who is hitting. Well, in Arabic, you can use it both ways. You can say that hitter in the meaning of hitter, like he's actually hitting somebody, or hitter in the meaning that he's being hit. Okay, it's a little weird, but you can do both of that. So same thing here, that nubuwa, it could mean that in the sense of maf'ul, right? Maf'ul. The nubuwa, it's coming from um like somebody actually doing the action, but it actually means the action is being done to them. So in this case, somebody who is a nabi is somebody who is raised. He's raised by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala above the rest of creation. So that's one meaning. The second meaning is also very nice. It could mean afaal, somebody who is doing the raising. Somebody who is doing the raising. He raises others. Okay? He raises others. So if you follow a Nabi, if you follow the teachings of a Nabi, he raises you from your state to a higher state, to a higher ethical state, right? It's 12:19. I want to end a little early. I want to speak more about this, of what prophets actually do. So inshallah, I'll do that next week. Um, and I'll go more into detail about the miracles of the Prophet ﷺ and a lot more. So any questions? No questions? Okay, inshallah. I'll see you guys next week. Thank you for attending today.
Jazakallah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum
Thanks.
salam.